Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 10. Last time we did the Holy Land, and today is Sin City. It is April 1st as I'm reading this. Chapter 10, Sin City. It's from my book Inside Out. Here we go. So we packed all our Haifa stuff into a shipping container and had it sent to Los Angeles because Barbara had met a nice couple on a layover at Newark International Airport who had suggested that Las Vegas was the place to move to if you want to go any place you wanted, especially if you need to find work. We flew back to the U.S. I parked my family and suitcases in the middle house on the farm in Illinois, the only available house the family owned at the time, and I flew on to Tucson, Arizona to see my father before he passed away. I knew he was bad, so this wasn't a surprise, but it was coincidental that we had been sent home in just enough time that I got to my father's bedside to see him. We talked, and then I had to pick up a family member at the Phoenix airport. I rushed up to Sky Harbor and got back just in time to hold him as he left us. And that's all I have to say about that. Except that the sunset that evening was the most beautiful 360-degree Tucson sunset any of us there had ever seen, and we have seen a few. Character arc alert. My dad and I didn't always see eye to eye, or eye to eye to be more accurate, but we were on good terms in his final moments. This will be relevant to high strangeness soon, and may be more important than anyone expects. Some months later, my dad appeared in a dream and said to me, quote, "They gave me iron iodide." I had never knowingly heard of iron iodide, so I think he actually visited me. But having looked it up, it is an ingredient in homeopathic medicines. At this writing, I'm not sure what he meant by what he said, and that was all he said. I went on to Las Vegas, where I rented a room in a condominium owned by the only Las Vegas area Baha'i whose number I had been given by a mutual friend. I had passed through northern Nevada a couple times. Barb and I had a friend from law school days who lived in Reno, but we didn't even know that at the time. I was meeting everyone in Las Vegas for the first time. I would share a 2-bedroom condo with the owner's adult son. I quickly discovered that Las Vegas also didn't need a 50-year-old white guy with my particular set of skills, who needed an air-conditioned job, it is a desert out there, any more than anyone else did. Ultimately, unable to find a 9-to-5 job, I took and passed the real estate exam and started as a salesman for Century 21 Advantage Gold in Henderson, where the only other Las Vegas acquaintance I knew of, the son-in-law of my daughter's babysitter, was already a realtor. Although I had never listed or sold a house, I had been the closing agent for FMHA, that's Farmers Home Administration, in Adams County, Illinois, and real estate law had been a large part of my small-town practice. Drafting deeds, mortgages, leases, bringing abstracts of title up to date, writing title insurance, and running interference for the Adams County Housing Authority. Dull, dull, and dull. The only thing I hadn't done was sales, and boy was I bad at that. But the one thing that was easy in Vegas at the time was credit, and mine was good. So I bought a house from KB Home on my signature, plus something like $100 or so in earnest money. And they said in writing they would build a house for me. I had driven up to Las Vegas in a very used sedan with no air conditioning that worked, part of the conversation with my father. Yes, that may not have been the best time to not be a financial success. And as soon as I got there, I bought a second car, a brand new Mitsubishi 7-passenger 4x4 on the following terms. Get this, no money down, no payments, and no interest for 1 year. That's a good deal even in Vegas, and especially if you really can afford a car, not just need a car. And they showed a complete lack of curiosity about the house I was buying. No pressure, no backup plan, no net. I spent the next few months learning sales and wondering if KB Home and Mitsubishi were as scared as I was. The family arrived as soon as KB Home's new house was finished, and soon after that our shipping container arrived by truck from Los Angeles and was placed in the driveway. The rest of the family arrived, and I suddenly had 5 additional souls dependent upon my efforts. The car salesman at Mitsubishi, who I would later buy other vehicles from pursuant to the usual terms and conditions, told me he was sure I would pay the new vehicle off in cash by the due date. Turns out I did. Las Vegas is built for boom and bust. That is all it knows. I was lucky and arrived just before the boom. My sales skills became adequate. I put forth the effort, and the market did the rest. In a few years, the Henderson office of Advantage Gold became the top-selling Century 21 office in the entire world. Let that soak in, please. And I was in the top 10% of the sales force. To give you some perspective, we had 600 agents in our office. 600. Payson, Illinois had 575 people when I was a kid. The next year, our office repeated as the Century 21 top-selling office in the world. Not bad twice. There were roughly 15,000 realtors in Vegas chasing 50,000 transactions, more or less. And I was one of the 1,500 agents that did 90% of that business. This was not because I was real good. I just worked half days, as they say, 9 to 9, 6 to 6, either half you like. Also, I went door to door, which everybody talks about, but very few people actually do, or very few did back then anyway. I'm sure everybody does it now all the time. If I ever met an alien without knowing it, it would have been during that period. Tripping piano players in the buff, retired rock and rollers from 1980s hair bands, Carrot Top, Penn, a guy who showed me his beautiful Smith & Wesson. He just waved it at me to keep me from walking up his driveway, etc. And it could be tough, but then the job description is get rejected as many times a day as possible. That is the real estate gig. If you get rejected enough times, eventually you will win. Someone will say yes, and you will close a transaction. That is why agents need to get paid. If they didn't get paid, no one would put themselves through all that to make the real estate business work. But that is not the point. The point relevant to this story is that I learned not to care about rejection. That includes what anyone may say about me or think about me. The no's don't count. Only the yeses count. And that is why I can write this book on this topic and not care what most people think. But also, since I still care what some people think, I am being diplomatic and respectful in that old, the names have been changed to protect the innocent sort of way. Back in Las Vegas, as I drove around, lights continued to go out on streets, on the Beltway, and sometimes whole banks of freeway lights would go out at once. It became a very real thing during this period, and the whole family was very aware of it. Upon any outing after dark, it was kind of like a game to see who in the car would notice the first light to go out. Lights would go out over my head in the parking garage as I walked into the Bellagio or the Paris or wherever. Not going in to gamble, but to meet clients for appointments about real estate showings. Las Vegas is not a bad town when you don't drink and you don't gamble. Also, above the strange doors I sometimes knocked upon, there was occasionally strange stuff in the sky. A couple years later, we had sold the KB home. It had gone up in value by the time it was completed, and by the time we sold it, it had gone up a lot. I purchased a small house in a blue-collar neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada, on Duarte Street, which ran along the top of a ridge with an unobstructed view to the east, looking over rooftops that faded into the distance. As you looked east from the back porch, Sunrise Mountain was about 5 miles off to the left, or the northeast, and between the mountain and Duarte was the glide path to McCarran Airport. Planes landing from the east basically followed Sunset Road to the runways. Also, in front of you and just to the left is Sunset Station Casino. Beyond that, down the valley 10 miles or so is Lake Mead. So, one hot August late afternoon, I went out into the backyard and looked up toward Sunrise Mountain and thought I saw a hot air balloon. But it looked wrong because the big balloon part was on the bottom and the gondola part seemed to be above it and off-center to the right. I went in and got my 8x40 Chevy Chase binoculars, I still have them, to get a better look. Well, what I saw certainly confirmed my understanding about what I had seen as a kid. It was not a balloon. It was 3 separate silver circles, a very big one, a smaller one, and above these 2 was a third one in between the other 2 in size. My mind read this as 3 objects of the same size but at different distances. The jets coming into McCarran lent a sense of proportion, and though I could not tell how close the objects were to the planes, from the comparison with both in my field of view, I guess the objects were roughly the same diameter as the wingtip to wingtip length of the jets. Also, they were smooth objects. No seams, rivets, panels, wings, ailerons, landing gear, propellers, and no exhaust, steam, or mist, and no movement. No movement at all. It was like they were nailed there. No float, drift, wiggle, no movement. Until, as I watched them through the binoculars, they simultaneously fell over 90 degrees, presenting an edge to my line of sight. Again, they were perfectly still, but now they were the classic thin saucer shape. No lights, windows, no bubble on top or bottom, very streamlined. And then they just continued to sit there. I even called my family out to look, too. They stayed put. Finally, the monsoon thunderstorms filled in the sky, and the saucers disappeared behind the wall of clouds. The jets flying under the saucers throughout all of this turned out to be below the clouds. The saucers were pretty big. A year or so later, we were at a car show at the District in Henderson. It was a big walk-through street vendor, Father's Day kind of thing. As we walked around, I looked up and noticed what I thought was a gray plastic bag straight overhead, puffed up like it was full of air, and just sitting there at about 2,000 feet above where we stood. The thing appeared very small and cube-like, and I guessed it was caught in some sort of an air pocket. I was not aware that alien vehicles might even come in that shape. It was not that interesting. My neck was getting sore, and I went back to looking at cars. When we got ready to find a restaurant, I looked for the bag again and found it still there. Now, years later, I don't think that was a bag, was it? Finally, one evening in one of the last years we lived out there, I saw from Summerlin a bright yellow light, very low in the northern horizon, possibly over Route 95 near the edge of town, and probably below 1,000 feet. The land rises up that way from where I sat. Just a moment later, the light, I didn't call them orbs yet, suddenly got brighter and larger and then quickly shrank to nothing. At that time, it seemed to be moving away. It could have been a jet from Nellis Air Force Base turning on the afterburners, but it was so low to the ground. Maybe it was a jet. I have seen jets out of Nellis perform unusual and amazing maneuvers from time to time, and maybe you have too. I saw one take off and go almost vertical instantly. That was impressive. So this could have been an IFO. Here's some good advice though. Always leave Las Vegas before the crash. Let me just say that I could have left earlier than I did without hurting anything. And that's the end of chapter 10. I think we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Bye.